I feel like the body is our primary home too, right? It's our home that we live in every single day. And when we can understand how the different parts of our body energetically function, we can help our body home be more balanced and integrated and less stress. So when you start to learn to work with the energetic systems of the body, it's very empowering because now I have skills to understand what's happening in my body, how to calm my body down if I get triggered. Most people don't know.
I'm very excited to introduce you to my friend and fellow light leader, Rita Lampe. Rita has been a licensed clinical social worker for over 30 years. She incorporates energy medicine in her therapy sessions and offers both virtual and in-person sessions at her private practice, In Harmony Energy Balancing and Healing, which is located in Allison Park, right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Rita has been studying Eden energy medicine for over 7 years. She combines her knowledge of trauma and how it manifests in the body with her energy medicine skills, offering clients a holistic path to healing the mind, body, and spirit. Rita has also completed Level 3 Reiki training, EMDR training, and is a certified Master Intuition Practitioner, all of which she incorporates to provide a safe place for people to heal. Rita and I explore a little bit of everything from energetic meridians and chakras, as well as acupressure and the 5 elements, and why having just a little awareness around all of those can offer profound healing from multiple sources of trauma. Today, we are stepping away from our interior spaces and into our other home, the physical body. Enjoy today's episode with Rita Lampe. All right, so I'm excited to finally have you on. I've been looking forward to this conversation because I think we both share a love for energy work and the elements, right?
Yeah.
And not just the elements, but we also talk about the mind-body home connection on this podcast. But we're going to step a little bit outside of the house and the home, and we're going to focus more on the body, which is, I think, your specialty, right?
Correct.
So, Rita, your title is Advanced Eden Energy Medicine Practitioner. So I thought we could start with just giving us a little insight into what that is exactly.
Sure. So firstly, I've been a licensed clinical social worker for over 30 years and worked with a lot of folks in various ways, but particular trauma. And so what I realized for myself personally, and then with my work, is that I needed to move more into doing something outside of traditional talk therapy. So I was trained in EMDR, which is another trauma technique. But then I was trained in Reiki about 20 years ago, a long time ago. And then I ended up starting to read about Eden energy medicine. And Eden energy medicine was started by a beautiful soul named Donna Eden. She started doing this work, probably 40 years ago, but it didn't evolve into a book, into a school of teaching and training until 20 years ago, something like that. So Eden energy medicine work, basically the foundation of that is traditional Chinese medicine. So similar to what acupuncturists study, but even beyond that, also integrated therapeutic touch with this model. And Donna started this whole practice because she healed herself. As a teenager, was diagnosed with MS and then had a heart attack and cancer before she was 35. Had 2 young kids and said, the doctor's like, we don't know what else to do with you. So she had already been in the energy world and started really delving in because she wasn't able to work at that time and practicing these techniques because she had studied with therapeutic touch, which for those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's a model that was pretty popular in the 70s and still is around today, but its basis is also Chinese medicine. They study the meridians and they use energy muscle testing. And they use acupressure points versus acupuncture points. Same points, just not using a needle. And so Donna worked on herself for 2 to 3 years and learned so much from working on her own body and evolved what she already knew into this. And it kept evolving and kept evolving. And she kept teaching it, and people kept saying, well, okay, you're teaching it, but, do you have anything for us to read? And so eventually she collaborated with her husband, David Feinstein, and they wrote her first book together, which is called Energy Medicine. And second book is called Energy Medicine for Women. So now the training, it's called Eden Energy Method. They changed the name from Eden Energy Medicine to Eden Energy Method, although we still acknowledge that we are Eden Energy Medicine practitioners. There are quite a number of us, but we're all over the world. I'm the only active advanced practitioner in Pittsburgh. So Eden Energy Medicine is that. It's very holistic. It's very broad and deep. I've studied a lot of different modalities, like I said, including Reiki and some others. And this lit me up. I'm super passionate about it because it encompasses so many things, and there's so many different ways to understand energy. It's not just one way, there's 9 energy systems that we study that all come from mostly Chinese medicine, although kind of overlaps with some of the Ayurvedic stuff and the Indian practices of working with the chakras. I've evolved and developed what I call an integrative trauma model based on the fact that I've done therapy and have these other skill sets. I kind of integrate that with the energy medicine while someone's on my table. A lot of my clients will say, this is kind of like therapy on the table, except you're balancing my energies. And that's the whole point of Eden Energy Medicine, is assessing the energetic systems of the body, seeing what's out of balance, and then working to balance them. It's similar to what you're talking about in your podcast. That word balance keeps coming up. Eastern medicine has been around, as you said, like over 5,000 years. Chinese have been studying meridians and radiant circuits and all of these things for a very long time. So there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom there and practice. But once you understand that we have a physical body, but we also have an energetic body. And the energetic body is both within our physical body and around our physical body. We're talking about the concept of home, right? That you are focusing on mostly in your work, integrating a lot of other things. I feel like the body is our primary home too, right? It's our home that we live in every single day. And when we can understand how the different parts of our body energetically function, we can help our body home be more balanced and integrated and less stress. So when you start to learn to work with the energetic systems of the body, it's an empowering thing, as you already know. It's very empowering because now I have skills to understand what's happening in my body, how to calm my body down if I get triggered. Working with people with trauma, a lot of triggers, right? So what do you do to help yourself? Most people don't know, or they go to the doctor, they go to the ER because they have a panic attack. But this work is so amazing because I can teach them about how to work with that energy of that fight or flight reactivity and calm that down in the body. I work with people to help identify what the imbalances are. On the table, we balance them, but it's an educational process. And I always tell my clients, this is a partnership. I'm not a guru. I don't have any magic formula here. I have knowledge and wisdom to share with you. Yes, on the table, I'm going to be doing some of the work, but the whole point is for you to learn about your body, you to learn to know what's working, to go into the body. And I listened to a little talk last night by a woman that you may or may not have heard of. Her name is Dr. Margaret Paul, and she wrote a book called Inner Bonding. And it's very similar in the sense that in order to heal, we have to get into the body. We have to learn how to listen to our body, to the signs that it's giving us that it's feeling triggered or stressed or joyful, right? And create more of that joy, but that inner bonding to all those parts of self and getting to know them. So that's why I feel like the body is a home that has lots of different rooms, and lots of different walking around in those rooms. But when you take the time to go there and really go within and sit and listen and feel. And many people are disconnected from body, it just happens. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just part of being human,
Right.
Disconnect, we dissociate. We don't want to feel that pain. So we go over here, or we numb it in some other way. Big part of my job is helping people get back into their bodies and get to know their bodies and get to love their bodies and listen to their bodies.
I love the analogy of your body being a home, because just like we store stuff in our home, we store a lot of these, like you said, traumatic events, conversations, and we don't even know how they're affecting us. So the education part that you're providing for clients, I think is the best. way to help them move forward, because then you're just someone they depend on for healing, right? You've really
Right.
got to take healing into your own hands. I've
Yeah.
had a few sessions with you, and I can't even describe how I felt when I left there. The sun was shining, and I was like driving down Route 8, and I was like, I feel like I couldn't even describe it. Like my body, like my aura, like everything around me just felt light. And I couldn't stop smiling. And it was like, I don't even know what she did, but I just feel amazing.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, just I think syncing up those energy systems, again, just like energy is unseen, but man, can it be felt? It was
100%.
amazing.
Thank you so much for that really, really awesome feedback because I do get that a lot from clients. And that's why they keep coming back
Yeah.
because it is exactly that. You're plugging into your energetic system, right? I'm helping people's bodies plug in energetically. I'm teaching them how to do it. They always leave with a handout for the exercises they can do to help their own body. And I call it energy hygiene. Donna created something called the daily energy routine. That's the sheet I give them. And there's simple, simple little exercises that help balance the energies, kind of ground you for the day, kind of like brushing your teeth. We take care of our physical body, but this is about taking care of our energetic body. So it's plugging in, it's clearing, it's balancing, and it's strengthening. So there's multiple things happening when you're doing the exercises, but there's also multiple things happening on the table. And sometimes it's really deep work, in terms of like going really deep using acupressure points to either sedate what we call take energy out of a meridian if it's too much energy or strengthen that meridian. And I'm not going to go too deep into meridians, but meridians are all related to organs or organ systems. And, acupuncturists use the needles and help that too in a totally different way, right? I mean, we overlap in what we do, but it's also very unique and different what we each do. So it's about strengthening, balancing, clearing. We do some energy clearing too. There's energies that get heavy. So, for example, I was with a client over the weekend working on her chakra energies, the 7 chakra energy centers of the body. And we test those as we test everything in energy medicine, which acupuncturists test in a quite different way than we do. And then when you find a chakra and then it needs some clearing or work, ask the body a few more questions. And anyway, it was heavy. I was clearing that heavy sort of energy in that heart center in particular, because there was a lot of grief for this person. So it makes sense that that heart chakra showed up where we kind of hold that grief in the heart and the lungs, literally, physically. If you've ever had intense grief in your life, a loss, you feel it in your heart. I mean, I've felt that. I felt like someone was stomping in my heart. The lungs, it's hard to breathe because it's just such a shock sometimes, even if it's a known loss, for example, or a death. So a lot of times we're clearing the heavy energy, then we're strengthening the energy and we're strengthening the aura energy. Simple way that I teach people to do that. And Donna always says, if they don't remember anything else, just make sure that they know how to do figure eights. Figure eights is also that infinity sign. An energy, like you said, Sarah, people say, well, I can't see it, but you can feel it. And you like what you thought in your body, that calmness, that clarity, that groundedness, that balance, right? And that strengthening. Well, one way to strengthen that energy, our energies, is this figure eight. So for example, the aura that most people kind of know what the aura is, it's this energy all around us, goes out to our fingertips, 360 degrees, and it flows around us. But I call it like the human energy placenta. It's like a big bubble of energy, but it's permeable. It's like a balloon, that kind of material. I kind of think of it that way, even though it's not that. People push on it, people can poke on it, just walking through the day. And sometimes you get these, what we call leaks and tears, these little holes in that protective energetic bubble. And so one of the ways to kind of seal up those holes or strengthen the aura is this figure eight. It's almost like you're sewing up or you're smoothing out that hole like you would with a real physical thing. And it works. And people feel better. And the aura is the first line of defense for emotional and physical wellness. Your aura is not strong, and we call it a collapsed aura. All these leaks and tears and holes go, and you don't have it. So you don't have this energy protection. It also can get detached from you. So it's anchored to us. Okay. It's tethered to us, which makes sense. I think of it as like that umbilical cord, right? so that we're connected to this energetic aura. And with trauma or other things that happen to us, it can sometimes pop off and just get detached. So we use that figure eight right over the heart to kind of reconnect it energetic.
Back to the heart chakra, I had a few sessions with you, and I was really focused in the hips and the sacral area. But what's interesting when you said the heart and experiencing grief, I felt that too. Like I would say often, I feel like I can't get a deep breath in, right? So what's interesting about that is I remember you saying that to me, like we need to connect these back up. We need to
Right.
sync them up.
Sure.
There was some grief that was going on inside of me that I wasn't even aware of because mentally I was so focused on the hips and the buttocks, like all that was just so tight and tender and sore and still is. I'm working on it. But interestingly, I was disconnected kind of in between those two, which
Correct.
was really cool.
Yeah, and that's very common. And so I've been working a lot with people on chakra connecting. It's not just about laying hands on to connect them and clearing them like we do with our particular techniques, but one of the ways I've been partnering with clients to really help balance, clear, and strengthen their chakras and reconnect them is using sound vibrational healing. There's what we call seed sounds for the chakras. And there's 7 sounds that connect to each of the chakras. And so what I've been doing with folks is that as I'm holding the chakras to reconnect them energetically, we're chanting those seed sounds because the seed sounds, it's like synergistic. It vibrates. And when you vibrate and you chant or you hum or you sing, you're vibrating and you can feel it in your neck and you're kind of in your face muscles. But right along the side of the neck is something we call the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is this really complex system that is involved in the fight or flight. And it goes here and goes all through the body and even goes down into the gut. So vibration helps calm that down. So when I'm working with clients, I invite them to do that with me. And we're chanting those seed sounds as we move up to connect the chakras. It's amazing to see and feel, but the client can feel it too. The energy flow, the opening and the connection happen. But also it's helping the vagus nerve and it's helping the body get into a deeply relaxed state. So it's multiple things are happening at the same time, which is so cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So one of the things we've talked about offline before is this conversation around ancestral healing, childhood traumas, and other traumas that even could go, past this current life. But I think it's a huge, huge topic for so many people right now. I'm sure you could attest to that. I'm sure you're seeing a lot more people coming in with it. I'm curious if you're seeing patients that are aware of it, or if that is something that's kind of coming to the surface once you have them on the table. Some of these deep traumas or even things that go beyond, ancestrally.
I would say yes and no. So there are some that are, depending on how much they've already been exploring this on their own, and some that aren't. But the folks that tend to come to me are super open, right? Because they're ready for the work typically. If they're not, they come for one session and then they don't usually come back, and that's fine too. They got some seeds planted. But it's been coming up a lot. And I think that's what happens with us as practitioners is like all of a sudden we see stuff happening and this pattern happening. And I would say in the fall and even now, a lot of ancestral stuff came up for folks. And I've been studying that personally on my own self, for years, like knowing my father's history, my mother's history, and going back. And people who do genealogy and know some real specific things can have a little bit better grasp of that and can see the ancestral patterns that might get handed down. And one of the things I tell both therapy and my energy clients is what's not transformed is transferred. And that quote comes from Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan priest and a healer as well, not in energy medicine, but in other ways. And it's so true. So what a previous generation has not healed, it gets transferred down through the generations. And, there's a term that kind of conceptualizes that a little bit. It's a scientific term and it's epigenetics, right? So a lot of people have studied epigenetics to see how this trauma that gets passed on generationally, and especially if say a woman, when you look back at, say, the Holocaust or, slavery, where people were beat and killed and watched murders and just awful stuff, that people held that in their bodies. And if a woman was pregnant, they've done some specific studies on babies that were born during the Holocaust, right? And what physically happened to them in their life. So this ancestral, unhealed, emotional, psychological, or physical, and oftentimes sexual trauma that's not healed, gets passed down through chemicals in the body, through the mother, and also just behaviorally, how that person, because they're not healed, then repeats those patterns in the next generation. I've seen it a lot in therapy. On the table, what's really cool in energy work, when someone's ready for it, I've had some beautiful, amazing things happen for folks. I've had them be able to connect to ancestors on the table, like energetically, And I had a woman whose husband committed suicide about 20 years ago and just really had a very difficult time with depression and letting him go. And we had a beautiful session on the table where she was able to connect with him and his energy, we'll say. And since that time, she said, I don't have the same sense of desperate loss that I had for all those years. Now, of course, she still misses him. I have had another woman on the table, and this stuff comes up spontaneously sometimes too, right? So she has secondary infertility and was really struggling with that, a lot of grief around that on the table as we did another technique that called the spiritual hypnosis. And we were doing a little bit of that. Lo and behold, she said her grandmother's presence was there. And then we moved through that. Then I asked questions. And then eventually she said that there was a child that died. And I said, well, who was it? And she said, and again, these clients are connecting to a higher realm of intelligence. And she said it was her grandmother's younger sibling. And so it was a little child, and she knew the story, but here on the table, it's coming out. And the connection then was that when this child died, great grandma had a really hard time. Of course, the child was about 5 years old. And that grandma, who was about 8, internalized this, what we call operational belief or limiting belief of, it's my job to make my mommy happy. And one of the ways to do that is to have a child, is to, and to do all I can to make her happy. But this thought that my client was having is, I have to have this child. It was more of a desperation. I have to have this third kid. And she couldn't let go of the fact that that might not happen, which is often common. But there was a link here that she knew was bigger than just this realm. And when she finally connected all the dots and cried on the table, she was able to go, wow, I didn't realize that, of course, great grandma never got healing for loss of that child, because back then they didn't do that for women. They don't do a great job now, right? Of helping women and men and families grieve the loss of a child, even if it's a miscarriage. We don't do a great job of that. And then you have grandma, who's this little girl, no one's helping her process the loss of her little sister. And then you have grandma growing up, and you see how this thought gets passed down. And once she realized that this was not really from her, this wasn't all about her, she was able to release the desperation of wanting to have another baby. And then it became something different. Then it became more of a relaxed openness to, well, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, I'll go through my own grief process. But it wasn't this desperation. Amazing things ancestrally happen, and we all have them. And I love that work. I find that Eden energy medicine lends itself really well to that stuff coming up, and me utilizing my other skill sets to help that person connect the dots and release some of the stuff that's really not theirs. And, some people may or may not flow with this next thought, but I know you do. There's also past life traumas that come into this lifetime with us, right? And I never used to believe in that a long time ago. And then I had the experience of realizing that it was actually real. And I know there's still some people out there that don't believe that, and I respect that. But for me, it really connected a lot of dots.
Me too.
And it still does today. I have something I'm grappling with right now, and leaving one place to maybe go to a new place. And the act of leaving was causing me a lot of stress and worry and anxiety and feeling like I'm going to be alone. And one of the people that's in my life as a healer said, well, this isn't the first time that you've had to go off
Yeah.
on your own. So that was like, wow, yeah, that's why it feels so big. It's not
Yeah.
just now. And it may be also ancestrally. I mean, all of us in this country's relatives, except for Native Americans, indigenous folks here in this country, everybody else had to leave their home.
Mhm.
All our white European ancestors and African ancestors, they left for different reasons. Unfortunately, African ancestors were stolen from their homeland, brought here. The white ancestral people here came up on their own accord, but most of them came to leave pain and suffering and discrimination and oppression. And so we have that in our history.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a huge advocate for past life work too. I have gone through several regression sessions in the past. And then once I started really cultivating my own intuition, I was able to explore those a little bit myself and through some of the masterminds both Rita and I have been a part of. So, yeah, it's amazing the work you can do on yourself once you have the tools.
One thing, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we do it different because we
Mm,
are working with the client while they're in regression and balancing the imbalances in that energetic state, which
mm.
is very different than the other models of regression. Because when they then come back energetically into this physical body, all that energy that was imbalanced back then is now not there anymore. It's balanced now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. That's interesting. I might need to book a session and just try it out. One of the past life authors that I really look up to, Ainsley McLeod, he wasn't a regressionist, but he is a spiritual guide. So he connected with his spirit guides to just tell you this is what happened in your past life, right?
Mhm.
And he would just say sometimes it's as simple as just reminding your spirit that that was then and this is now. And I always use that anytime I feel triggered by something. I think there's like 9 ways in which you're kind of immobilized by your past life, and it shows up in different fears and phobias and things like that. Once you start to kind of get some awareness around what those are for you, you can use that tactic to just kind of
Mhm.
stop it. And it kind of resets you a little bit too mentally,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's so amazing. And this is why it's so important to do you're like a paleontologist, you're digging up the history, the stories. And it's so, so true. I mean, my great grandmother lost a child at 12 years old. Okay. And that got passed down genealogically and ancestrally. My grandmother lost 6 babies to the RH factor in the 30s and 40s. Again, no one helped my grandma grieve. My mother, I truly believe, and everybody in my family does too, is the bearer of that grief that was never processed. And she's had physical pain most of her life.
Mm.
And it's just holding in that grief. Fibromyalgia is what she has. And I see this as a common thing. Chronic pain is a lot of times related to holding in really long-term ancestral emotional trauma.
Mm. Mm. As we're talking, I'm like, okay, I need to book another session because I'm feeling these things in my body. Even though I have that awareness and I do energy work, like it's still there. And I know you
Yes,
too, you're a practitioner and you're still working on things for yourself. Um,
absolutely.
well, one other thing I want to maybe touch on that I think could be really helpful for some listeners is like you mentioned with the lungs, and that kind of holds on to some grief. I know you've shared stories with me about trauma in the legs. Would it be possible for you to give us like a generalized rundown of the body and like what could potentially be going on from head
Yeah.
to toe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in a quick way, I will try my best.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mentioned meridians. Okay. So meridians are energy pathways. And some people believe, and there's being studies that they are the fascial system, right? So they actually move energy through the body. And that's what acupuncturists work with. That's what we work with as well. So the meridians, there's 14 of them. 2 are what we call overarching. They're the central and the governing. They go around the body, through the legs, and up around the front and up the back, connecting at the lips. And we call that the microcosmic orbit. Like I always describe it as the seam of the Easter egg, of that
Mhm.
plastic Easter egg. It holds everything together. So that's really important to work with central and governing. Even though they're not connected to a specific organ, they're connected to the whole energetic body, which everything is anyway. But then with the 12 are related to organs or organ systems. So all of those meridians are operating in our body all the time. And I think of them as like, we talk about veins and arteries bringing blood through the system, and the energy does the same thing. So if there's an energy pathway that's blocked, that particular organ is not getting what it needs either from an energy perspective, or if it's low energy, or if it's too much energy, right? And that's what we're looking at for the imbalances. But each of those meridians also is part of the 5 elements that you talk about in the physical body. Each of those 5 elements are connected to a particular 2 or more meridians. So earth is spleen and stomach. Metal is lung and large intestine. Water is kidney and bladder. Wood is liver and gallbladder. And then fire has 4. It's the triple warmer, the adrenal gland, small intestine, heart, and pericardium, which we also call circulation sex, which governs the sexual organs too, not just the pericardium around the heart. So what's your dominant? We call it 5 rhythms, 5 elements. It kind of goes back and forth with those terminologies. If you're a dominant wood element, which I am dominant wood and earth, my particular physical ailments or struggles will probably show up in those systems, right? Maybe liver, gallbladder, maybe stomach, spleen. And also, these elements govern other things in the body. So wood governs tendons and ligaments. That energy of wood governs that. So guess what? Because I'm a strong wood and a strong earth, I've had a tendon and a ligament surgery. No surprise there, right? With the earth element, I have not had any spleen issues, but my spleen needs work just to stay strong. So you can see when someone's dominant rhythm walks in my office, and I usually can tell sort of a lot, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get to know the person. Or if they tell me, man, I have kidney stones all the time, I know they're probably a dominant water element. Or so we have the physical manifestation, but then we have the emotional, right? But emotionally, we'll go through the meridians again. So we have the earth element, spleen and stomach. You'll see a dominant earth element express a lot of worry and a lot of overwhelm. An unbalanced earth element will look like a big worry word, always worrying. And metal, large intestine and lung, is grief and letting go. So if I have someone that comes and says, I've had chronic respiratory infections my entire life, I know that they have a lot of grief in their body. Or they have large intestine issues with IBS or something like that. That gets held in the intestinal issues too. Trauma gets held everywhere. But IBS is related to trauma and an inability to let go of a lot of grief. And then we move on to water element, which is kidney and bladder. And that emotion under stress is fear. So the old sayings that we have, I was so scared I was about ready to pee my pants. Well, that's true. If you have fear that gets activated, you're going to feel like you want to pee, right? And then we move on to wood element, which is liver and gallbladder. And the dominant emotion under stress for wood element types is anger, frustration, and irritation. So I have a client who got her gallbladder out a few years ago, and she's a dominant wood energy. And that's her dominant emotion under when she's stressed. And I'm like, no surprise that she got her gallbladder out, because gallbladder is the holder of the anger extended outward. Liver is the self anger, beating up on self. And then we have under fire, triple warmer. So adrenal glands. So someone comes with me with adrenal fatigue, and their dominant emotion under stress is panic. So they're panickers, and they just panic. Or they're ones that have panic attacks all the time. So it affects their heart. So the heart, that pericardium, small intestine, it'll also be people again with bowel issues sometimes. So when someone comes in and they're giving me their physical history, I always ask them, what's your dominant emotion under stress? What do you think it is? And they're like, well, and then I give them some examples. And immediately, as soon as I say the one that's them, they go, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
And then I teach them about the elements and how they can understand themselves, because you work a lot with the elements, but the beauty of what I love about them in my work is knowing how this is affecting someone emotionally and physically. And then I can work with them on the table, just the elements. We have particular techniques just to work with the elements. And I don't always have to work with the specific meridians, because the elements kind of oversee that. So if I work to calm down those elements, or those rhythms, we call them, then I'll go back and check liver, and now it's calmed down. And there's breaths that go with each of the rhythms and each of the elements that help. Again, like the seed sounds with the chakras, I have clients work with me to do those breaths that help balance those rhythms, those elements out. So there's a mind body connection always, 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 always. And because we're multi complex beings, right? And because I have a little bit of fire in me too, my triple warmer, my adrenal system, my trigger might go off and might start to panic, right? But I calm that down. And I know I can work with water element on my body, kidney and bladder to help calm that fire energy down. So we have a control cycle with the elements and we have a flow. They flow within each other, then they control each other. So they work as like a little internal family system of energy.
Mm.
So, so cool. Right. So that's the meridians. The chakras are, again, I said, are kind of a mirror and at the other side of the coin, but they're different. They hold emotional energy and they govern the organs and the systems of that space that they are in. But it's just a different kind of energy. But the meridians tend to be the ones I go to with physical stuff and emotional. And the chakra is more for the emotional shifting. It also is impacting the physical body too.
I'm happy we did that because I think that's going to help a lot of people start to see themselves in, some of these elements, I guess. I mean, I know I'm a dominant wood like yourself, and irritability and frustration is definitely when I'm stressed, I'm irritable, don't talk to me, I'm snappy, totally me. But even friends and family in my life that I'm like, oh my gosh, so true. They need to look at this. I know they're working through grief or they're not working through their grief or they're angry at themselves and they're not aware of it. So I think so many people are going to relate to that. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I love it because for me, you have all these different personality inventories out there. The 5 elements or the 5 rhythms. There's a book by Donna's daughter, Dondi Dolan is her name. You can get it super cheap.
Yeah, I like Donna's
and it
stuff.
explains each of the elements and how they express themselves in the world. So when we understand that, we're less judgmental. So I might say, this person's really getting on my nerves. Because wood people don't have a lot of tolerance for certain things, right? And especially slow people. We don't have tolerance for people who are slow, right?
Yeah.
Water element people are slow. They just are slower and moving through things slower. So instead of getting irritated, I can go, oh, they're a water element. I can respect that. I can learn how to talk with them. So when it comes to relationships and understanding other people and getting along with other people, it's a way to step back and say, oh, they're not personally attacking me. That's just their reaction under stress, right? You understand the elements and you can look at, you just said, oh, I see it in that person. Then you can see it and not take it so personally and also not be so much judgmental of other people.
Thank you for pointing that out because that's what we need more of. We need more patience
100%.
and understanding and kindness. Yes, I love that.
Right.
So Rita, I could talk about this all day for sure. Me and you on the elements train, right? Do you work with people remotely or is everything in person?
Yes. And in fact, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that because that's why I love this work too. It's so teachable. I can do energy testing remotely with folks. And we did all through COVID. I was in my 3rd year of training and we had to see 100 people and document 100 sessions and get mentored through that year. A lot of those I did in person, but when COVID was at its height, we were able to do virtual. And it was so great to learn how to do a virtual session, how to teach. And I think the best combination is for people to come get a session personally on the table. But then if they can't, do a virtual one, because when you're doing virtual, you have to do the work on yourself. I'm instructing you how to do it. And so then if you're a kinesthetic learner, or most people can be, or that it's a strong suit for a lot of people, you get to do it. And then when I say, okay, go, to practice that exercise, you already have a neural memory of doing it because you had to do it in that virtual session. So yeah, virtual I can do. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Finally, after years of doing all kinds of other work, this is the work I'm meant to do in the world. This is my passion. When you finally find your passion, it shows. Like I see it in you, this enthusiasm, this energy, this passion, right? It's infectious. In a good way, it's like, it draws people in. People come when they're ready to come. And I totally trust that. And again, I'm just blessed.
Rita, thank you so much. This was so lovely. And I will put more information in the show notes for everybody on ways to reach you if they're interested in learning more about what you do. And thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I loved Rita's definition of the mind-body-home connection and her analogy of our physical body being an extension of our home. I also enjoyed how she broke down the elements and how certain physical ailments and emotions can give us clues as to what our dominant element might be. What do you think yours is? We often hear that awareness is key, and just as Rita quoted, what's not transformed is transferred, generationally speaking. I said this in last week's episode too, that we inherit a lot more than just genetics and furniture. Rita and I went a bit deep, talking about ancestral healing and past life exploration, but these are all tools that anyone can learn more about to begin or continue their healing journey. We all have suffered some amount of trauma, whether you're aware of it or not. But if something in this episode resonated with you, then I encourage you to stay curious. My email is always open for further questions or insight to any of these topics. And I think I speak for Rita too. As a listener of this podcast, Rita has graciously offered free 15-minute phone consultations and 20% off your first session. Just mention the Living Elemental podcast at the time that you contact Rita. Links to contact her, which I highly recommend you do, are in the show notes. Until next time, much love and gratitude.